I remember thinking as I read the newspaper, I thought, well, I've seen that before. But I'd seen it in my mind's eye because it was exactly as my father had described it to me. My name's Ian, and this is my Cold War story. My dad worked in the aviation industry in the 1950s. He worked for what we probably now call an aerospace company. And he told me when I was a child in the 1960s that for a time he'd done what he described as wiring up atomic bombs. And he described what the inside of atomic bombs looked like. He said that there was a spherical core inside of the atomic bombs, and that's what he worked on. In that core, there was a kind of sphere of explosive, which when it detonated would squash the nuclear material in the middle of the core, and that would create the nuclear explosion. And it was his job to wire up the sphere of explosives around the nuclear material. And this was a very critical, precise job because the explosives had to go off at exactly the same time, within kind of microseconds of each other. And so if you cut the wires too short or too long, then that would ruin the whole job. I believed him, but it seemed like kind of a fanciful idea. The bomb would explode by squashing the nuclear material by the use of explosives. And I think at that time, the public had little awareness of what the inside of nuclear weapons looked like. So a number of years later, I think probably in the early 1970s, I was reading a newspaper, and in the Daily Mirror they had a picture of the inside of a British nuclear weapon. And the caption for the picture, as I remember it, said that this is the first release of a picture of the core of a British atomic bomb. And I remember thinking as I read the newspaper, I thought, well, I've seen that before. But I'd seen it in my mind's eye because it was exactly as my father had described it to me. I wasn't particularly perturbed by it. I thought it was really interesting, and I thought that they were kind of a part of the natural order. Like my parents, I thought that they were an essential part of British defences. So I was actually quite proud of him for contributing to Britain's defences, and he thought the same way about it. My dad did talk about the use of nuclear weapons in the Second World War at some length. And in that particular case, he was strongly of the view, which many people held, that he thought that the use of nuclear weapons against Japan actually brought the war to a close much more quickly than it might otherwise have done, and that ultimately saved lives. And that was it was a personal issue for him because he had been a soldier in the Second World War. Since that time in the 1960s, when he first told me about this, my views really haven't changed that much. I mean, I'm hyper-conscious of the awfulness of nuclear weapons. But they were a product of historical circumstances, and I think that most of the people who worked on them sincerely thought that they were contributing to the defence of the United Kingdom. And that is my Cold War story.